A very warm welcome, everybody, to our team representatives press conference ahead of the FIA Formula One Qatar Grand Prix. Joining us this evening, should I say, we have left of screen Fred Vasseur, in the middle we have Steve Nielsen, and right of screen we have Mario Isola. Very warm welcome to you all. Mario, perhaps we could start with you. One of the big tech stories coming into this weekend is the 25-lap limit on each set of tyres. Can we start by you telling us why you've imposed that limit?
Yeah, that comes from last year. As you know, we had a couple of punctures during the race, but after the race we also analyzed the tyres used, as we always do. And it was clear that they were worn at 100% or even more. There was already an indication on Saturday after the sprint with 25, 26 laps. They were quite worn. So during the race, going up to 34, 35 laps basically was pushing the tires to run on a high severity circuit without a tread. And when you are running without tread, there is a big risk of puncture. You damage the construction. And so we made the proposal to the sporting committee in March to limit the mileage, and then we decided to go with this direction.
We've been here before, a couple of years ago. It was an 18-lap limit back then. Why the increase to 25 this time?
Because it was a different issue. 2 years ago, it was a damage on the sidewall caused by the curbs. Then we made again some analysis on tires, and we asked for modification of the curbs, which the circuit did. It was successful, so we didn't find the damage on the sidewall, on the compound of the sidewall. But in that case, it was a different problem with excessive wear, especially on the front left.
Let's throw it forward to 2026. Now, like the teams, Pirelli has been juggling the current season with developments for 26. Just how difficult has it been for you to develop those new compounds, new tyres, without a 2026 car on which to test them?
It is a situation we know from the past, when we had to move from 13 to 18 inch or with the wider tires in 2017. So it was important to work with the teams and together with the teams, not only on track, but also with the virtual model of the tire and with the help of the teams and their simulators. We had a feedback on the expected performances of the car. So we have worked in parallel between a virtual environment and testing on track with the mule cars. And now we have finalized the development. The construction was homologated in September, and now we just decided the compounds for next year. So let's see in Abu Dhabi.
Well, you're testing them, as you say, in Abu Dhabi in a couple of weeks' time. What are the headlines for us about the new compounds?
But basically that we decided to homologate 5 compounds from C1 to C5 because we found compounds with a good delta lap time between them. Not knowing the cars, obviously we wanted to have a delta that is slightly bigger than the current one, and they are well spaced in terms of degradation. So the idea was to have the flexibility to move softer or harder depending on what we find in the first races of the next season.
Thank you very much for that. I'm sure there'll be more questions for you in a minute. Steve, why don't we come to you now? While we're talking 2026, tell us what's going on in Enstone at the minute with regards to next year's car.
Well, probably like all the other teams, Enstone's a hive of activity. If you go in all the departments, all you'll see is parts for next year's car, chassis and gearboxes and all sorts of stuff. So I think we're about to go into, certainly in my memory, what is one of the shortest winter breaks. Somebody told me yesterday that from the checker flag in Abu Dhabi to the first time our car goes on the track is 36 days, and that includes the compulsory winter shutdown. So work that would normally have taken place over 2 or 3 months has been compressed into literally 4 weeks. So the overlap between finishing racing in 2025 and producing 2026 car is massive. And we are racing, of course, here this year, but Enstone is completely on 2026 and has been for some time.
Understand that, but how important is it to end this 25 season with a bit of positive momentum. We've actually seen a couple of, an upswing, should I say, in performance at the last couple of races. Has that been track specific, or have you found something with the car?
I think it's a combination of quite a few things, honestly. I mean, it's an upswing because the bar's set pretty low, unfortunately, for us recently, which is not great. It's not where we want to be. It is true that the last couple of races we picked up a bit. It's probably something to do with track temperature, cooler temperatures in Brazil, certainly cooler temperatures in Las Vegas. Those temperatures are a bit higher here, so it probably might hurt us a bit more than we'd like. But of course, we want to go into the winter with a nice result and a positive feeling for our workforce, our sponsors, and everybody else. It's the amount of work ahead of us all in the winter is massive, but it's a bit of a springboard if at the last race or the last few races you have some nice results. So we're trying.
Steve, you've now been at the team for 3 months, or back at the team for 3 months, I should say.
Yeah.
What has impressed you the most about what you've found at Enstone?
The weather, you see. That's
Not at the moment, Fred. It's
not quite.
The weather's bad in England at that.
I mean, it's a cliche, but it's a racing team. It's full of people with racing spirit. It's had mixed results recently, but I think that there's a passion and a will to put it back to where it has been in the past, and the dedication is huge from the top to the bottom of the company, and it's my job to coordinate that, strengthen the areas that are good, re-strengthen the areas where we are weak, and bring some common sense and consistency to the management. I mean, there's been too many changes over the last few years at Enstone. I don't criticise any of my predecessors, but it's time for patience and common sense and consistency. And of course, we want the teams to be better, and patience and Formula One don't go well together, but that's the task. And so we have to spend the next few years building, and it's a slow grinding process that is F1. There are no magic bullets. You just have to fix a million details in place. People, more than anything, it's a people business. So I've kind of relearned that lesson, if you like.
Right. Steve, thank you very much for that. I'm sure we'll have more for you in a moment. Fred, coming to you now. Your driver's comments in the media in recent weeks have attracted a lot of attention. Let's start by talking about that. How difficult has it been for you to manage that situation?
Well, honestly, I think that I perfectly understand the frustration of the drivers after a crash, or even more when they are not responsible, or a difficult performance. We have exactly the same frustration into the garage or on the pit wall. But then the most important is to react after the frustration. And I think honestly, the frustration sometimes is good. And the most important is to be able to react and from the Monday morning, and to be focused on the next one, on the next year also, and on the future. But you can't imagine, and I would be even more frustrated if the drivers were happy when we have a tough weekend.
But when you've discussed it with the drivers and the attention they're bringing to the team in that way, I mean, how did those conversations go? Were they apologetic, or what did they say?
No, I don't think that we went so far away. It was not a drama. That honestly, my two drivers, they are like they are, and I perfectly accept this, and I'm fully aligned with this frustration that we have exactly the same on the pit wall. You know that it's when you have the crash in Brazil and Charles is out of the race because Piastri and Antonelli are crashing together. That for sure that you have a huge frustration. We put so much effort during the season to try to fight for P2, and in one tenth of seconds you are losing a potential P2. That it's huge. Or when you don't have the good race because that you have an issue, a technical issue or whatever, that this frustration, I think it's part of the DNA of what we are doing. Then from drivers to drivers, they have different ways to express their frustration, but everybody has exactly the same.
I mean, you're 53 points behind Mercedes, 13 behind Red Bull. Let's talk about that Constructors' Championship battle. How do you see it playing out over these last couple of weekends?
Well, I would prefer to be P2 with points, some points ahead of the others, but honestly, I'm not paying attention to this gap. I even didn't know last year when we arrived in Abu Dhabi what was the gap with McLaren, and you told me in the press conference that we have to be focused on ourselves to do the best that we can on the next 2 weekends. We have 2.5 races to go, and we have still some good points on the table. Let's be focused on ourselves to try to do the best, and we'll see in Abu Dhabi where we are.
Fred, final one from me. This is the last time you're going to be in a press conference this year. Can you reflect for a moment on the 2025 season? Why it panned out as it did, and at what point in the season did you realise that perhaps it was going to be tougher than you were hoping for?
We didn't start in the best way. That with the double disqualification in China, this cost us tons of points compared to our direct competitors. And quite early in the season, McLaren was so dominating the first 4 or 5 events that we realized it will be very difficult for 2025. It means that we decided very early into the season, I think it was end of April, to switch to 26. It was a tough call, and perhaps I also underestimate a little bit the call on the psychological side, because then when you have still 20 races to go or 18 races to go, and you know that you won't bring any aero development, it's quite tough to manage psychologically. But overall, we continue to push that. We brought some mechanical upgrades, that we are trying to do a better job on operation, and this is the DNA of our sport. But no, we have to accept this. It was a call. I think it was. I'm still confident with the call that we did, and it's okay. Now let's fight for P2 with these conditions.
All right. Thanks all for that. Let's now open this to the floor. Where are we going to go first? Yeah, Stu.
Stuart Codling, Autosport. Question for Mario. You said 5 compounds for 2026. That means the C6 experiment is over. Could you explain in a little more detail the thought process behind dropping the C6 and not progressing with that idea? Because it's one of those things that seemed like a good idea at the time.
Yeah, simply because the C6 that we found was too close to the C5, and we already saw this year that when they are so close and there is no clear difference, it's a little bit useless to bring both. So homologating the C6 was an automatic way to skip one level. That means C3, C4, C5 or C3, C4, C6. At that point, it's useless to have an extra compound. So we will continue to look for a C6 for 2027 as soon as we have an idea on the performance of the cars next year. And obviously next year we can test with the current cars, with the proper cars. And we will have a better feedback.
Thank you, Mario. Right, next.
Leonid Kluv, Grande Premio. Question to Steve and Fred. Adrian Newey was, of course, confirmed as team principal for 2026. How does it change the dynamics and collaboration between you guys, between team principals? Thank you.
Do you want me to go? Honestly, not at all, I don't think. As Fred's already said, I think we're quite inward-looking. We have the structure we have for our own reasons. I'm sure other people have different structures for their own reasons. But in terms of interaction, I think that was your question. I don't think it changes anything for us, honestly.
Nothing to add.
All right, next.
Diletta Colombo, Automoto. A question for Fred. You mentioned before how tough this season has been for your team, but are there any positives to take from 2025?
Yes, you have always positive, and even in a tough season, I think we had a decent recovery in terms of performance, that we were back on the podium. Mexico, Austin, I would say Sao Paulo, we are not far away. That it means that we were on the right way. It's good for the team, at least for the psychological side, and you always improve a little bit everywhere in every single area. Is the best preparation for 2026. But the most important of this call that you said that we did is that we agreed quite early that we will put maximum of energy on the future. It means that this is then we have to react as a team. That to even when you have tough weekend, to come back Monday morning at the factory and to continue to push and to develop and to work all together. And I think that this. I understood the question from Tom, but honestly, that we had a good reaction to tough session, to tough weekends, and let's see next year if we did a good job this season also.
Okay, thank you. We're next. Ian, please. Yeah.
Thank you, Tom. Ian Parks, Racing News 365. Another question for you, Fred. Looking at Lewis specifically, it's obviously been a very difficult year for him, as we all know. But positively, what has he brought to the team that's had a good impact? And additionally, what do you want to see more from him going forward into next season that will add to that team going forward?
Well, the season was difficult, and I think it's a mathematical that it's a constatation. It's not a feeling. But what the most important is the reaction. The most important is the energy that you are putting to push the team and again to try to understand what are the issues, to fix the issues, and it's details by details. For sure, we knew that it will be difficult from the first quarter of the season, but at the end of the day, I think when we had podiums in a row 1 month ago, I think it's the job of everybody. It's not the job of one driver or one engineer. It's the job of 1,500 people at the factory, from the 2 drivers, from all the engineers. And collectively, the reaction was good. And Lewis is part of the reaction for sure.
Okay, thank you, Fred. Next.
Jack Smith, Motorsport, Monday, motorsportweek.com. A question for Steve. Before Franco was confirmed for next season, one of the things he told us in Mexico was that he feels that he could prove himself by being in a pre-season situation for the first time, having not done that with either you or Williams. Aside from what you feel that he can offer on track in race conditions, what do you think that he can offer the team in terms of development of the 26 car in next year's pre-season testing?
Well, tricky to answer because I'm not sure what we're going to face in 2026 pre-season testing yet. The car's not on the track. Franco is early in his career. He's learning. He has some weekends where I'm sure he would look back and maybe do things differently, and other weekends which are more successful. But it's learning. It's like learning anything for the first time. And he's on that journey, and we're going to help him with that. But specifically to identify what issues we may have pre-season 2026, I don't know the answer yet. I'm not sure anybody does.
Okay, thank you. Next one. Yep, the front.
Gianluigi Paolucci, F1 in generale. Question for Fred. Did you expect this kind of performance you had in FP1 here?
Well, I think we don't have to pay too much attention to the FP1, and this is true from the beginning of the season on every single event. On our side, we had some issue with the power steering. It's not a secret that Charles was vocal on the radio, and we have to fix it for the sprint quali now. But it's okay-ish now. That if you have a look on last year, and I think it was relevant classification last year, all over the weekend, change each session. It means that the field is so tight that for different conditions, different level of wind, different track temp. Last year we had 5 sessions, 5 different classifications. It means that we need to keep this mindset. You need to be open-minded and to try to adapt the car to the next session, not to the previous one. And let's see what we can do for sprint quali.
Mario, can I just bring you in on a 2026 matter? You're staying with the 18 inches, but the tyres are going to be narrower. How's that been affecting performance during testing?
Well, we had to redesign completely the tire with a new profile, optimizing the footprint, and obviously because of the new aero package, we expect a higher speed on the straight, but at the same level of load or similar in cornering. That means that overheating could be an issue, and we have work to try to minimize the overheating that we know drivers don't like, keeping some thermal degradation. So the targets were clear, but obviously on a smaller size is a little bit more difficult, unless you don't penalize the performance quite a lot. That is not the target, obviously.
All right, thank you for that. Let's go back to the front, please. Yeah, Christian.
Christian Minat, motorsportmagazin.com. Question for the two team representatives. There was a meeting yesterday about driving guidelines. What is the way you want to go forward with it? Destroy the guidelines and just rely on the system and the expertise of the stewards, or improving the guidelines all the time?
Yeah, I think we are all a bit schizophrenic. We want to have consistency. It means that in this case you need to have guidelines and to follow the guidelines, but at one stage we want also to introduce a human factor able to judge. It means that to not follow the guidelines at one stage that situation is becoming difficult. This is coming, I think, compared to the past also from the fact that the field is closer probably, and that we have more often this kind of situation. But I think to keep a human factor into the decision makes sense, because it's not because that you have the wheel nut 1 millimeter in front of the mirror or below the mirror that, you know, for the drivers it's very difficult to first to assess if they have the front axle in front of the mirror or not. It's honestly quite impossible when you are into the car, and at the end of the day that to have a human factor, for me it's important, but we have to accept that the decision can be a bit different if it's not just a mathematical approach.
Yeah, I'd agree with Fred, honestly.
Develop a little bit.
Okay. I'd mostly agree with Fred then. No two situations are the same, and as Fred said, there's always going to be a human factor. And I think it's, you know, this is a sport that wants to measure everything to the nth degree and have an exact science. And when you have human judgments involved, there are going to be variations, and I think we just accept that as part of the sport, to be honest. I think there's always going to be differences of opinion. It's not only in this sport, it happens in other sports as well. And I think we trust in the FIA. They got fine people doing it, and, you know, happy with it.
Okay, thank you both. Right, back to Ian, please.
Ian Parks, Racing News 365. Fred, another question for you. You mentioned earlier that you opted to shut down development at the end of April, and you mentioned you underestimated the psychological impact that had on the team, and it was tough to manage. Just what processes and steps were put in place following that decision to manage that impact, and how much of an impact did it have on the drivers, and has that resulted in their performance as well on track?
Yeah, but first this decision was shared by everybody into the team. That it means that at one stage you have a look on the championship, you say, okay, it would be very difficult to come back on McLaren with the delta pace, the delta points, and you say, okay, let's at least the resources that we have into the wind tunnel, let's be focused on 26. In the other end, we can still continue to develop the mechanical side and to bring some upgrades on the car, except aero. And it's what we did, and it was a good exercise, honestly. For sure, the drivers, they were part of this decision, that because they are fully committed on the project, and it's something that we have to share all together, that in this kind of situation, you have to act as a team, and it's what we did at this stage of the season.
Okay, thank you, Fred. Any more from the floor? Yes, Luke.
Luke Smith from The Athletic. Fred, another one for you. Just picking up on Steve's point about the very, very short off-season this year, like how much of an added challenge is that, and did that factor as well into the decision to switch early to 26, because it's going to be such a tight turnaround?
No, because you did the reverse planning from TO1. That it means that we have to release everything a bit earlier than what we did last year. For sure, that the fact that you have now the mandatory shutdown in Christmas, it's good for us and for the family. But it's we just have to anticipate everything by 10 days. But the exercise is the same. It's just, I think, more for track operation that it's difficult, because that it's not after the checkered flag. That it means that the week after the checkered flag, we have still the test in Bahrain, in Abu Dhabi, and it means that it's not 36 days, it's 7 days less. No, for them, and when I say this, I'm not speaking about me or the drivers. I'm speaking first about the mechanics, that it's much more difficult for them than for everybody else, and we have to think about them. But it's true that this exercise will be tricky.
Fred, Steve, can we expand on that? You talk about it being tough on the mechanics. Of course, there's no test team anymore in Formula One. It's going to be the race teams that are going to be testing the cars in January at Barcelona. How do you ensure that everyone gets enough rest after what's been a long 24 race season?
Well, you have to forward plan, as I think Fred just said. You can't wait till the checkered flag and then decide what you're going to do. So we've been looking at that sort of stuff, staff rotation and stuff, months out, in order to make sure that we've got the workforce available to build cars and go testing. We're building next year's car in December. I've never known that before, so it's a completely different way of looking at it. But that work and scheduling starts months before.
Yes, it's true that during the racing season you can imagine to have a kind of rotation. For the test we'll have to bring everybody, because we'll have probably some night shift also. That means that all the mechanics will be in Barcelona and Bahrain. Let's think about them, what we can do to give them some free time during the sessions and keep in mind that we are doing the best job of the world.
Good point. Okay, any more from... Yeah, we're back to Ian. Yep.
Ian Parks, Racing News 365. Mario, Tom mentioned earlier that quite obviously next year's tyres, they've not had the 26 car on which to run. What plans are in place for next season to you to get a better understanding of how the tyres are interacting with the cars? Are there any plans in place? How quickly can you react should changes need to be made?
Next year we have the usual plan of 40 days with all the teams. The plan has been already defined and shared with the teams. So the point is that for sure we cannot change the allocation for the first 5 races. We are producing the tires for all the pre-season tests, and also logistics is a nightmare also for us, because we had to start the production as soon as possible to supply the tires to the pre-season tests that are not only 3 days but 9, plus the first 5 races that are overseas. So the allocation has been defined already, but then depending on the results of the first 5 races, we can change in the second part of the year. If we want to go a bit harder or softer, we have this flexibility.
Okay, thank you for that. Any more? If there are no more, we will leave it there. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Best of luck for the rest of the weekend. Thank you.